Very quick message before we begin. Myself and Mark have agreed to do one-off specials every time that there's some big news events like the things that are happening right now. And as a special thank you to Mark, if you could follow him on Rumble, if you could follow him on Substack, he is basically kicked off every single platform. Whilst you're there, make sure you follow BluntClarity on both Rumble and Substack as well. I'll leave links to everything in the description below. Please check them out. On top of that, the full censored chat can be found on Spotify. However, the only place you can find the unrestricted, uncut chat will be on Substack and Substack alone. Please check it out. This will help support the show and it will enable this type of content to keep going. Really, really do appreciate it, honestly. If you are enjoying this type of content, make sure you leave a comment below. Anyways, that's enough from me. I hope you enjoy.
Thanks for inviting me on, and it's been a bit of a sort of rushed event. You said a lot's happened and a lot has happened. Last time we spoke, we were talking largely about issues to do with the Middle East, but since then, what's happened on the streets of Britain has been unprecedented, and last night's riots in Belfast show that people have finally had enough and they're not taking any of this lying down anymore.
Yeah, literally. I think every time we talk, the dial goes up a notch, a notch, a notch. And this is, like you say, this is the breaking point. And it's not just Belfast. You know, we've seen it in Glasgow as well now. It feels like this could be the start of things starting to fall apart. But, you know, we'll see. But the thing so two things, right? Obviously, what happened in Belfast, very, very recent, but it kind of piggybacks off what happened with Henry. So I wanted to start there. I think, you know, I don't even know where to start, to be honest, because the more I keep hearing about that case, the more information that comes out, it just keeps blowing my mind how much negligence, just how badly Henry was treated when that was happening. I don't know. What were your thoughts to start off?
Well, firstly, I don't want to start like this, but I've got to correct you. None of this is negligence. This is Conservative Party policy. This is government policy that killed Henry Nowak. This is systemic. It is anti-white two-tier justice. And really, two things are at play here. The first are two pieces of legislation. One passed in 1988 and one passed in 2019. Both pieces of legislation passed by Conservative governments. And this is so important. So the first piece of legislation is the Criminal Justice Act, passed in 1988. That limited the rights of people to carry bladed articles or pointed objects in public. That was the Criminal Justice Act, 1988, and it was section 139. And the specific wording is it makes it illegal to carry any sharply pointed or bladed article in a public place. But section 139 5B creates a specific statutory defence if an individual is carrying a bladed article for religious reasons. And this exception granted Vikram Digwa the right to carry the two knives he was carrying on the evening he murdered Henry Nowak. But this isn't the only piece of legislation. There was another piece of legislation that was passed in 2019, and that's the Offensive Weapons Act. And the Offensive Weapons Act broadened the number of exceptions for Sikhs. Now, the Offensive Weapons Act made it an offence to carry weapons like knuckle dusters, throwing stars, and zombie knives, but not just to carry them, but to even possess them within your own home. So if you were in possession of these items, not in a public place, but even in your own home, you could be found guilty of a serious criminal offence. But the Offensive Weapons Act broadened the protection for Sikhs, allowing them to continue to carry their daggers, but also to own, carry, and to give at religious ceremonies large curved swords. So these two acts of parliament carve out these massive exceptions that allow Sikhs to do things that white Britons simply aren't allowed to do. Allow Sikhs to possess, carry, and gift these weapons, which range from small kirpans, which are these little knives that Sikhs wear around their necks on a cord, to possessing large Shasta daggers, which is the murder weapon in the Henry Nowak case. It's the weapon Vikram Digwa used to stab Henry Nowak. And for people to understand this, we have to make it clear exactly what this is. This was a knife around 21 centimetres in length. That's over 8 inches, that Vikram Digwa was openly wearing in a sheath attached to a belt. It was publicly visible on his person. But they're also allowed to possess these large curved swords, and they're allowed to use them in religious ceremonies. Now, both these pieces of legislation, the 1988 Criminal Justice Act and the 2019 Offensive Weapons Act, were both passed by Conservative governments. And the latter was passed when Kemi Badenoch was an MP, and she voted in favour of that. So she's now running around telling people that, we need to examine these things. How did this come about? She wants to be the anti-woke crusader who looks at these pieces of law and says, how did we get here? Well, we got here because you voted for it. Because exactly. The party that you're the leader of voted for these two pieces of legislation. But the other important thing, that these two pieces of legislation are linked, so that's part one. Part two is the way the police treated Henry Nowak when they arrived at the scene of the crime. So the first piece of information is that Vikram Digwa was legally allowed to carry the murder weapon that he used to kill Henry Nowak. That's the first thing. The second thing is, how did the police act at the scene of the crime? Well, the police decided that they were going to take Vikram Digwa's false claim of racism, more importantly, than they took Henry Nowak's pleas for medical assistance, because he was lying on the ground, pleading for his life, begging for medical attention. But the police took the claims of racism more seriously. Now, again, what the Conservatives want to claim is this is some kind of woke policing that might be down to individual officers or down to some, strange bit of DEI guidance that they know nothing of. That is complete nonsense. This is down to what is known as the Police Race Action Plan, which was initially released in draft form in 2022. Again, when the Conservative Party were in government and when Kemi Badenoch was actually a minister. And it was rolled out in 2023 and 2024 when Kemi Badenoch was the Minister for Women and Equalities. And the Police Race Action Plan makes it basically binding guidance that officers are anti-racist in all that they do, and that they put a massive, massive emphasis on this zero tolerance for racism. This means, in real terms, that when police attend the scene of a crime, regardless of what is going on, they have to prioritize any claims of racism above anything else. That is not, and that's not me just making this up. I'm going to read something to you here. And this is from the Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. And Hampshire and the Isle of Wight is the constabulary where Southampton, the place where Henry Nowak was murdered, is part of. So Southampton is part of the Hampshire and Isle of Wight constabulary. And Donna Jones, who is the Police and Crime Commissioner, that's an elected position that oversees police constabularies. She said this, and this is a direct quote: "The adequacy and regularity of that training will also be reviewed, and how officers are trained to triage competing accounts at the scene of a violent incident, specifically whether the provision of immediate medical assistance is treated as an unconditional duty that operates independently of any assessment of culpability." So what does that mean? Well, what she's telling you is at the moment, immediate medical assistance takes second priority to a claim of racism. So if a white man is lying on the floor bleeding to death and police arrive at the scene, it is policy for the police to treat the victim of the stab wounds as a second priority to any claim of racism. Claims of racism are the number one priority at the scene of a crime, thanks to the police race action plan. And any officer that doesn't follow that guidance can face a disciplinary hearing. And this was all the doing of the previous Conservative government. This was brought in when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister, when Kemi Badenoch was a minister, when Suella Braverman was the Attorney General, and Priti Patel was the Home Secretary. So everything that I've explained of how we got to this two-tiered justice, this anti-two-tiered justice that left a young white boy bleeding to death, pleading for his life as police handcuffed him, this was all the doing of successive Conservative governments. It was all something passed by the people who are now claiming they are the solution to the problem.
Yeah, mate. I mean, this is the thing. Like, you hear anti-racism. What that's actually saying is it's racism to white people. It's racism to the indigenous peoples of that land, to us, to the British. So obviously this isn't sustainable, right? And the Henry Nowak case was the most egregious example we could possibly have. A young 18-year-old boy, no criminal record. You know, everyone's been comparing it to George Floyd. A literal, right? There's no need to sugarcoat this anymore, because it is just infuriating to see how this is unfolded. And this whole, you know, it's been pointed out by many people, the fact that they can legally walk around with all these knives. Meanwhile, you know, the grooming gangs happened. Girls, indigenous Brits, girls who are victims, who have been like attacked many, many, many times now. They can't even have pepper spray. They can't even defend themselves. Meanwhile, guests essentially in our country can carry knives, right? Make that make sense to me, please. But yeah, and the thing is too, and I've seen a lot of people say this, that like you're saying, oh, it's just this one officer. It's just a one-off. You know, it's not systemic. If it wasn't systemic, the groom and gang scandal would have never worked. It would have never gone to the scale it did. Over 100,000 white British girls. There is such a clear and obvious problem. There is such a clear two-tier system. And like we spoke on our last chat, we are at the bottom of that system. We are at the lower end of that hierarchy, no question about it. And it should become very obvious to everyone by now. The thing which I kind of find concerning is when the riots was happening, and like we see the mainstream media try and downplay this all too much. But the reality is, if a white British person was to retaliate at the Sikh community, if they were to stab someone, we all know that the Sikhs would have retaliated back. And like that really just says how fragile these multicultural societies are. It literally could have fallen apart with just that one incident, you know?
Well, the interesting thing about this case as well is that Vikram Digwa got a comparatively lenient sentence. And one of the reasons for that lenient sentence, well, there was two reasons for the leniency in sentencing.
Wow.
The first reason was down to the sentencing guidelines and down to the 1988 and 2019 legislation that I cited earlier. And that was that the judge said it was possible, these are his words, that Vikram Digwa had, quote, a good legal reason for carrying the knife. So because he was carrying a Shastar dagger and it was sheathed and it was in a belt, visible to the public, and that is a blade that certain Sikhs claim they need to carry, and that their guru, as they call it, smiles upon them if they carry that particular blade in that way. they have this legal exception. The judge accepted that because that's the law, and under sentencing guidelines, that allowed the judge, when sentencing, to start Vikram Digwa's sentencing at the lowest possible tier of sentencing for a murder conviction. So there are 3 tiers of sentencing when it comes to a murder conviction. Everyone who is found guilty of murder gets a life sentence, but that life sentence begins with 3 minimum terms: 15 years, 25 years, and 30 years. Vikram Digwa's minimum term began at 15 years. He was then he then had 8 years added onto the sentence for aggravating factors, and then 2 years subtracted from the sentence for mitigating factors, giving him a total of life with the possibility of parole after the minimum term of 21 years. However, if a white lad had, or a white man, because he was 22 years old at the time of the crime, had done that to an 18-year-old Sikh boy, it would be highly likely that the CPS would have placed a racially aggravating charge on top of the murder charge. So it would have been racially aggravated murder. Now, I say that because not only would it have been a white man killing a Sikh boy, but also you have to remember that at the scene of the crime, Vikram Digwa introduced the issue of race when the police arrived. So we know 2 things. We know Vikram Digwa stabbed Henry Nowak, but we also know that at the time of the crime, Vikram Digwa was thinking about the issue of race or ethnicity, because he introduced that at the scene of the crime when officers arrived. Now, imagine a white man stabs a Sikh boy, acts in an absolutely horrendous manner, stabs him repeatedly as he's trying to escape, climbing over fences, takes his phone, degrades him by filming the incident, then tries to interfere with evidence at the crime scene, gives a false narrative to police officers, but also introduces the issue of race. I am in no doubt that the CPS would have charged that white man with a racially aggravated offence. Now, if you are found guilty of racially aggravated murder, you get the same life sentence, but with a minimum starting point of 30 years in jail. That tells you exactly how 2-tier justice works. If this had been the other way around, and a white man had killed the Sikh boy and had been charged with a racially aggravated offence, which would then have seen 6 additional years added on to that, as Vikram Digwa had 6 additional years added on to his 15-year minimum term, giving him the 21-year minimum term. A white man that had committed the same crime against a Sikh boy would have served life with 36 years before he could even be considered for parole. Now, that is the absolute perfect illustration of 2-tier anti-white justice, because you would have had an identical crime, identical circumstances, you would have had the same degree of suffering, the same degree of victim impact to the families, but because of the supposed motivation being different, you would have had an additional 15 years added on to the sentence because the perpetrator was white. Now, all of this is systemic. This isn't a series of bad decisions made by liberal judges. That's not what this is. This is something that is absolutely systemic. It can be found in law, it can be found in precedent, and it can even be found, as we said, in national strategic guidance, handed down to police by the previous Conservative government. At that point, you realise that everything is now stacked against white Britons, and that the indigenous people of these islands, they're not just second-class citizens, they are at the bottom of the racial totem pole. And I have done breakdowns, both in writing and on streams, of this police race action plan, and you can read within this that the way it is structured is that different ethnic groups form a hierarchy, and the police are incentivized to take their testimony above that of white Britons. And this is done at every level of the police force. So what you're hearing now, this isn't something that's a document that's wheeled out at special training days, then quietly forgotten. This affects policing at every level of the institution's hierarchy, from police chiefs right down to frontline officers.
This is honestly treasonous, because it is us. It is the white Britons who have the greatest claim on England, on Britain. The society is downstream of us. So to put everything against the people who have created that society, that is the definition of treason. This is the thing too. Everyone is feeling it. Everyone is waking up to that reality. Finally, we're seeing that the white Brits, whether it's in Ireland, whether it's Scotland, England, wherever, people are at the end of their tether. And we're finally start to see this huge pushback, which, to be honest, I don't think the government were ready for. And as we become more tribalized, and it's inevitable, I'm not calling for violence, but it's just human nature at this point, it will only lead into other groups becoming more and more tribalized as well, which means these problems are only going to get worse. And so, exactly what we saw in Belfast, that's kind of like the first signs of this starting to show itself. Just to finish up with the Vicwan Digwa, that whole case. I mean, he lied consistently through the case, claiming that Henry was drunk, but he was under the drink drive limit, claiming that he was being racist. There's no evidence of that. In fact, there's evidence that they were conspiring to make up this whole story. There's a recording of it on Henry's phone. So there's actually, it's actually worse than that. So if you sorry to butt in, please.
But if you read the sentencing remarks from the judge, which are now within the public domain and have actually been published in full in at least one daily newspaper, the sentencing remarks from the judge reveal that when Vikram Digwa was finally arrested, he was arrested with his brother, Gurpreet. And Gurpreet and Vikram were put in the back of a police van. And when they're in the police van, I believe everyone in the back of a police van is recorded, not only to see if they make any admissions of a crime, but also because, if they start harming themselves or doing something, it's all caught on camera and there's no ambiguity over what took place in the back of that police van. Similar to the way police wear body-worn cameras to capture footage so there can be no ambiguity.
Right.
Now, here is something that's very interesting. As soon as they were in the back of the police van, Vikram Digwa admits to his brother that he did stab and kill Henry Nowak, and he states that he intends to mislead police by claiming he was the victim of a racist attack. But here's the rub. He does all of this in Punjabi. He's speaking to his brother in Punjabi, hoping that the police, and it's a reasonable conclusion to come to from his point of view, hoping that police can't speak Punjabi, don't understand him, and that he can get his brother in on the deception. However, he was being recorded, and when that recording was passed to an interpreter, the police then found out that Vikram Digwa had admitted to the offence, admitted to the lies, admitted to the deception, and had involved his family. And also you have to remember at this point that his mother is involved in all of this. She is currently in prison on remand awaiting sentencing, because when his family arrived at the scene of the crime, there is some debate over what Gurpreet was involved in, his brother, because he was taken in the back of the police van with Vikram Digwa, and he did know that Vikram Digwa was lying, because it was admitted in court documents that Vikram Digwa admitted to his brother that he was lying in Punjabi. But his mother absolutely was involved. She removed the Shastar dagger, the large 8-inch or 21 centimetre long blade, from the crime scene. And she hid that at her home. And when the police searched the home, they found that it not only had Vikram Digwa's hairs wrapped around the handle, but it was covered in Henry Nowak's blood and covered in Vikram Digwa's mother's fingerprints. So the whole family, were at the scene of the crime. Vikram Digwa, his brother, his mother, and his father. And at least one of the family members, we know, because they've been found guilty, actively was involved in attempting to cover up the crime. It's absolutely shocking. And despite, and this is something that people need to understand, despite the fact Vikram Digwa was caught on camera admitting to lying that he was in fact the victim in all of this, the police still combed through Henry Nowak's social media, every message he'd sent on his phone, every private communication sent by messengers or on social media, to try and find any instance of him sharing a meme, laughing at a racist joke, making an off-colour comment, so police could justify their actions at the scene, justify the fact they handcuffed him. And I want to show you something. This is rather irregular, but wait 2 seconds. I happen to have with me, because I'm in my office and it was just on the floor, I just caught it out of the corner of my eye, a metal ruler here. This is 21 centimetres. So from the point of that finger to the point of that finger, that is 21 centimetres. And you can see, for comparison, how long that is compared to my head. And you can also see how long that is across my chest. We are talking a dagger with a blade of that length.
Yeah.
They are allowed to carry that legally and openly.
Yeah.
And that was the weapon used to kill Henry Nowak. And we have to remember as well, not only did Vikram Digwa stab Henry Nowak through the chest, the dagger entered between his ribs, pierced a lung, and sliced a critical blood vessel in his chest, which is what caused him to bleed to death. The actual bleeding that killed him was ruled to be from that internal bleeding. As Henry Nowak fled, because he attempted to flee his attacker, he climbed over a fence and some bins, and then he received 3 further stab wounds, 1 to the abdomen and 2 to the back of the legs. Those stab wounds were administered as he was escaping. So this wasn't an attack where one man attacks another, the other retaliates, the attacker falls to the ground, and the person defending themselves was like, oh my God, what have I done? I used the dagger to defend myself. This isn't what Vikram Digwa claimed. Vikram Digwa then pursued Henry Nowak, repeatedly stabbing him to the rear. What's more, there was another knife wound to Henry Nowak's chin. He was slashed across the face at some point. We don't know when that happened. Did that happen in the initial stabbing? Did it happen when he was trying to escape? Or did it happen when he was on his knees, suffering from 4 stab wounds, and then Digwa slashed him to the face as he was on his knees. We don't know. But there were 5 knife wounds in total to Henry Nowak.
Yeah.
And the police ignored all of that, pushed his ice white hand up his back, handcuffed him against his protestations. And I think it's really important to state this. But Henry Nowak was a completely innocent boy. Yet he slipped into unconsciousness, and his last experience on this earth was one of being arrested, having his arm pushed up behind his back and being handcuffed by police who mocked him just before he slipped into unconsciousness. Now let's ask the simple question, and there's no need for us to answer it. If an innocent black, Asian, or Sikh boy, or anyone from an ethnic minority was treated in that way by the police, how would the police have responded? Well, I'll tell you how the police responded in this case.
Yeah.
The police chief of Hampshire and Isle of Wight Constabulary, a man called Alexis Boone, has stated that he doesn't even recognise accusations of two-tier justice, that he doesn't think the police, he absolutely stated that the police are not there's no anti-policy, but him and his officers all operate under the Police Race Action Plan, which prioritises any claim of racism above the need to administer emergency medical care. The Police Race Action Plan is one of the reasons why Henry Nowak is dead, and the police won't even admit it. Now, I'll tell you this, if the races were reversed, the police would not only be apologising, but they would be admitting to any systemic biases. But they won't, because the systemic bias negatively impacts white Britain.
Spot on. Exactly that. And the thing which is the most concerning, I mean, most people who are in this space are well aware of the two-tier justice. But the thing that really was eye-opening for me, like, Digwa has proven that he's lied. His family are willing to lie and
he
cover up.
He lied in the police family.
Exactly. The family were willing to take their side, even though the son is admitting that he full-on murdered this kid. An 18-year-old boy, completely innocent, stabbing him as he's going. There's no, I don't think there's any, there was any proof of any retaliation either. I think, the claim that he made with, he's got bruises on his face, I think that was all lies. And even if there was, Henry Nowak's been stabbed 6 times. And there's multiple videos of Digwa, walking around the street with a sword. There's videos of them shooting guns in the back garden. There's clearly a pattern here. The thing which is the most concerning...
I want to just jump in there as well, because, look, I feel like at the beginning I tried to do a bit of an information dump, because there's so much here I want people to know.
Yeah.
And it's difficult. All of it's in writing on my Substack. So I've laid all this out in 3 lengthy articles on my Substack. One that deals with the case itself, what happened on the night, one that deals with the sentencing, and one that deals with the Conservative Party policy. But those 3 articles together come to something like 15,000 words or more. They're lengthy articles, so please go and read them. They're available for free on my Substack. They're full of information. They're full of quotes, links, and resources that you can follow up and learn more if you wish to. But the important thing about this is relating to what you were just saying, is the prosecutor and the court did everything in their power to claim that the death of Henry Nowak was due to what they termed a weapon obsession. That Vikram Digwa, he had this obsession with knives, guns, he was obsessed with weapons, and that is what led to this tragic death. And it's amazing, isn't it? Whenever there is a white boy, white woman, white person, white Briton killed by an ethnic minority, the police, the prosecution, the court, the judge, they go out of their way to explain the killing in any way so as that killing is not framed from a racial perspective.
Right.
And they do everything they can, if they can, to shift blame onto the victim. And look, something else came to light during this. I want to bring this up because it's a different case, but you and I have spoken about this case before. Remember when we spoke about the case of Valdo Calacane, the Nottingham spree killer? It's now emerged in the wake of Henry Nowak's murder that when Valdo Calacane killed those 3 innocent people in Nottingham, the victims were all taken away and their blood alcohol level was tested. Now, obviously, the police and the pathologists were trying in any way they could to maybe make a case that the people who were killed, you know, they were stumbling around, they were under the influence, maybe there's some other wrinkle to this case that explains it. But they didn't test the blood alcohol level or the drug level in Valdo Calacane's blood. He refused, and they respected his wishes.
Right.
So you've got a guy who's just killed 3 British people on the streets of Britain early one morning, and the police take the bodies, test all the bodies for any form of intoxication for some reason, but refuse to test the killer. And you wonder, why were they doing that? Because with Vikram Digwa, they clearly tried to do everything in their power to shift, and the police did this as well, to shift the blame onto Henry Nowak. But then you find out they did something really similar in the case of Valdo Calacane and the Nottingham spree killings. And you're thinking to yourself, if you're white and you get killed by somebody from an ethnic minority background, the police will treat you so badly because they're trying to frame a victim. They try to frame the victim in a negative light every time.
Yeah. The anti agenda is real, and the narrative is just becoming so clear now. And you know, all I wanted to add on to that is the reaction from the Sikh community. Like, this is clear cut, in my opinion. And this isn't just because, you know, I'm white, so I'm trying to be tribal and collectivize. No. Like, objectively, this is clear cut. Henry Nowak, 18-year-old boy, innocent. He was attacked repeatedly by someone who then tried to cover up his own crime. His family tried to cover up his own crime. It's recorded, it's proven, everything's there. The Sikh community still backed Digwa, right? There's recordings of some of these Sikh influencers saying, oh, should I piss or shit on the grave, right? So what really, like, and people are waking up to this. I understand that. Everyone who watches this channel is probably more than far aware, but you might not see race, but race sees you. And that is just a reality that we need to try and become aware of, because actually out of everyone, out of every group, we understand that the least. We don't understand how to look after one another. We don't have that community in the same way. And this is something which really, ultimately, that is the thing which will save us. But going on to this tribalism aspect, I wanted to talk about the whole Belfast. This innocent guy who this Sudanese migrant tried to behead. I mean, we could take this in multiple ways. We could talk about, as I'm sure you've seen, the BBC, the instant coverage of this story. Even though this video is going viral, the BBC comes out with the headline, "Man taken to hospital with serious injuries after stabbing." We've all seen the video. He tried to behead him. What are your thoughts on that?
I think people rightfully are blaming the politicians. They're also rightfully blaming other government institutions, such as the courts and the police. And that is absolutely correct as well. The courts and the police, they have a massive degree of culpability for what has gone on. And that should never be denied. But I think what we need to also point out is the media have played a massive role in all of this as well. And we should never, ever deny the media's role in this or minimize it, because there is essentially a pipeline here. The politicians bring in migrants, and they bring in migrants who are the most ethnically, racially, and culturally different to us. So they're not bringing in, high IQ Swedish families. They're not bringing in, Germans or Italians who are very, very similar to us, who have similar sensibilities. They have a similar religion. They have similar traditions, and they're going to fit in. They're bringing in people from places like Somalia, Sudan, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, people who are extremely different to us, not just in the way they look, but in the way they think and in their moral code, because they are culturally different to us. And morals are not universal. That's the first point. But then the same politicians pass laws that ensure that the people that they have brought in that are so different to us are treated as first-class citizens. They're treated better than us. They are above us on the ethnic totem pole. Then, when those migrants commit horrendous acts against us, the police and social services cover it up, minimize it, and treat those people better than we would be treated if we had committed identical crimes. Judges and courts then sentence those people to lesser sentences than we would receive if we had committed those crimes. And whilst all of that is going on, the media, at every step of that process, of that pipeline, are running cover for the government and the institutions. So when the government bring in the migrants, the media tells us they're helpless refugees that we must embrace because they're going to culturally enrich us. When the government passes laws that place those people above us within the ethnic hierarchy, we are told those laws are absolutely necessary for a functioning society, that those laws are fair, that they bring about equity. When the police treat those people differently to us and treat us more harshly, we are told that the police are doing this to make sure that equality is carried out on the streets, that the law is being applied fairly. And finally, when the judges pass sentences, we are told that those judges are being fair, that they are being just, and that justice has been served in a manner that we should respect. And when the migrants do commit crimes, they always have a way of downplaying it. You will have a guy, you don't know where he's come from, you don't know what his migrant history is, what his real nationality is, and he'll stab somebody to death in Slough. So how do the media report this? Slough man stabs other man in street. Well, that's the vaguest headline imaginable. Man taken to hospital after violent act. What violent act? How badly injured was he? Why aren't you talking about the perpetrator? But conversely, if a white man stabbed someone from a migrant background, the headlines are written in a polar opposite manner. So the headline will be written, so it reads, white man goes on brutal racist stabbing spree. There is absolutely nothing within that headline that is left to the imagination. The white man was the aggressor. The motivation was racism. The crime was brutal and savage. And by extension, the victim class are the minorities. But when the reverse takes place, it is vague, It is fuzzy. It's grey around the edges. You have to read the article. You have to pick out the details. Eventually, the perpetrator's name may well be featured within the article, but it'll be 3, 4, 5 paragraphs down, sometimes even after the big picture that appears in the middle of the article. So you have to really, really press on through to find out that this was another anti-attack. So the media should be held as much to blame as the government, the politicians, and the anti-institutions. And the BBC are one of the worst offenders when it comes to this.
Yeah, and it's the fact that we spoke about this just then, but off camera, I mean, but it's more common. You know, the per capita, the people who are coming in are more violent, right? So not only are they downplaying it, sometimes they don't even report it because these attacks are becoming, well, for one, these attacks are more frequent in that community. And the more people which come in, the more frequent these attacks are going to become. We're going to see this more and more. And like you say, each time they are going to downplay this more and more. I just wanted to share the screen real quick. I got an article. Where are we? So this is a week before the beheading of the guy in Ireland. And I mean, as you can imagine, this is aged really quite well. My upbringing has shown me that everyone deserves to be and must be treated equally. I want a Belfast that does that in word and in action, no matter what your background is. This is the mayor, highlights the drive towards diversity.
When you read that and you see her stupid face, you realise something, don't you? She's there with that look on her face. She's got the big necklace or the big medallion round her neck. She's so proud that she's the mayor. And she's reading off the script, isn't she? Right. There is a script for these people. The first thing that she says when she becomes mayor has nothing to do with the history of Belfast. It has nothing to do with culture or tradition. It has everything to do with paying lip service to the current multicultural status quo, which has become like a religion to these people. Rather than thanking, God for becoming mayor, she thanks the multicultural state and reaffirms her belief within that multicultural state, and she affirms that she will fight for it and that she believes the city's greatest strength is its diversity. In other words, all of the people who've come here recently that never built Belfast, whose ancestors never had anything to do with the city's evolution or construction, but these newcomers are the most important. And it's what they all say, and it's sickening. And I hope she gets hauled over the coals for this. I hope that people pull her to pieces, that they don't ever vote for her again, that she is absolutely heckled and barracked everywhere she goes and makes a public speech because of these comments, and that she's held to this. She said, was this Sudanese lunatic who tried to behead a white man, was he one of the people you were talking about? And of course he was. Of course he was. If 2 days before that man had been sitting in an HMO somewhere and she had been walking around the area and the BBC or another media outlet had asked her to go and stand with him for a photo opportunity, she would have been telling the media how he was the kind of man that makes Belfast the vibrant city it is today. Because these people are shameless monsters that absolutely are on board with our destruction. And people should never forget that.
Yeah. Exactly. It's not only like, even if you took the crime aspect out of it, these people are a net drain on average, right? So they're not going to contribute. They're not really going to help the community. They're not going to integrate well. And on top of all of that, they are going to be violent. They are a risk to your population. There's literally no positive in the grand scheme of things. And that's what's leading to this. I got a few videos. This is what happens when people start to lose faith with their government, with their media, when they feel like they've been betrayed. This is the reaction. And like I say, this is only going to become more common. So here we go. Here we go. Where are we? Okay, that was actually one of the more tame ones. You know, the other videos when
I've
you watch
seen a lot of these, and I'm going to give you a hot take here.
Yeah.
This is the result of European people who for generations have been ignored, insulted, and belittled by politicians. Every time European people voice their concerns or their distaste over the issue of mass immigration, at best, politicians ignore them. At worst, the politicians and the media demean them, insult them, and call them names. And if you ignore people and you demean them for long enough, that resentment festers and builds. It becomes like layer upon layer of dry bark and leaves on a forest floor. And that can be very dangerous, because then all you need is one spark and everything goes up in flames with such fury and force, it's almost impossible to put those flames out. And that's exactly what has happened in Belfast yesterday. These people who have been ignored, belittled, humiliated, and degraded have finally reached their snapping point. And the spark that lit the fire was this horrendous anti-white attack by another one of these migrants, who the Daily Mail yesterday revealed was a legal migrant that had a visa.
Right.
And we're told, well, you might have some legitimate concerns about the illegal ones, but what about the legal ones? Well, here's a legal one beheading someone in the street. We've now hit a point where people have unfortunately realized that however they vote, the politicians don't change anything. However large their voices, however loud their voices, the politicians won't listen. And if the politicians ignore people for long enough, people then decide that they are going to disconnect from the political system and take matters into their own hands. And this is completely the fault of the establishment. But again, let's turn this around. Let's imagine that a black man was beheaded in the street by a white man, and the black community felt that this was a result of the political class, the police and the establishment not listening to them. They'd riot and the politicians would support them. The politicians would be there saying, well, you know, this is a fiery but mainly peaceful protest, and it was a long time coming. We need to start listening. No, you need to start listening to European people who want nothing more than their right to remain a majority in their ancestral homeland and govern their own affairs. We're not actually asking for much, are we? We're not asking for the moon on a stick. We're simply asking to live peacefully within our ancestral homelands without the interference of foreigners who want to do horrific things to us, our families, and our children.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, this is the thing too. The very same politicians in Ireland I've seen calling, like, guys, please don't politicize this. They're even asking, don't share the video. It's only going to enrage people. Right. Don't share things which are objectively true. These are the same people. The moment Black Lives Matters happened, these were the same people calling for justice, calling that there was a systemic oppression, even though this was something which happened in America. The same Irish politicians now are saying, oh, it's not that big a deal. Guys, let's just move on, right? And this quote has come up a lot in the past few days, because now we're seeing the people start to attack, well, not attack, but they're starting to harass politicians. And as you quite rightly said, this is what happens when you mess around with the public for far too long. But when the people fear the government, this is tyranny. When the government fears the people, this is liberty. We are coming into that time right now, because this is the breaking point, it seems.
Yeah, and it really is a situation where the politicians have left people with the belief that there is no other choice, there is no other route here. And you will see over the coming days politicians from both sides of the illusory political divide coming together, calling for calm, and placing the blame at white people's feet. That's always what happens. Starmer will call for a crackdown on the protesters. Kemi Badenoch will say, look, this isn't an issue of lives matter. This is an issue of legal problems that we must look at carefully and examine, because she never says we're going to get rid of the exemptions for Sikhs. She says we need to examine the legislation and look at loopholes. Yeah. They'll all say that Black Lives Matter and take the knee, but they will declare that the term Lives Matter, the term that was championed in Britain by Patriotic Alternative, myself, Laura Towler, Sam Melia, and good people within our organisation. When we were, years ago, when we were doing those banner drops at the top of hills and mountains and doing the hikes with the big Lives Matter banners, people were saying that we were racists. The establishment attacked us. They've had us permanently kicked off social media, permanently kicked off X and YouTube. But we were right. We were the first ones to make this call, and that call is still being silenced by both Labour and the Conservatives. The fact is, people must now realise that both sides of that illusory political divide are in on the plan. Both need replacing, both need to be confined to the history books. Labour and the Conservatives are equally terrible. And moving forward, white people need to turn their backs on those politicians. If somebody knocks on your door on behalf of the Labour Party or the Conservative Party, you must shoo them away. You must tell them they're not welcome, they're anti-white, and their policies have led to the mass rape of over 100,000 British girls. They have blood on their hands, and they are not welcome in your area. And if you have people that you know in your life who stick up for the Labour Party, shame them and shun them. If you have people in your life who vote Conservative, mock them, deride them, and make them know that they are voting for more of the same. We need a complete and utter rejection of the current political system of both sides of the House, and fundamentally we need a collapse. And we need collapse because the system can't be reformed. The system was designed to oppress us, abuse us, and ultimately to us. A system designed with those goals in mind can't simply be reformed. There are no minor tweaks that can take place which will make a system that has those fundamental goals serve us in a meaningful way. It needs to be torn down brick by brick and replaced by something new that does serve our needs. Anyone that calls upon you to vote for Labour or the Conservatives and talks about examining laws, closing legal loopholes, or looking at guidance, or having a review of police policy, they are trying to placate you, they are laughing at you, ultimately they're insulting you. It all needs to be torn down. These politicians need to lose their seats, they need to be given their P45s, they need to be on the unemployment line, and all of these police officers that have gone along with it, they need to be sacked too. Men like Alexis Boone, who dare stand there and deny two-tiered justice, need to lose their jobs. And I'll tell you this is how you can tell the Conservatives are part of the problem. Donna Jones, the elected police and crime commissioner for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, she appointed Alexis Boone. She could sack him tomorrow, but she won't. Despite the fact he's denying the truth, despite the fact he is minimizing the horror of what happened to Henry Nowak, the Conservatives have the power to remove him, but they won't. It was the Conservatives that put the police race action plan into force. They are the ones that crowed over the police race action plan. They are the ones that created the conditions that led to Henry Nowak's death. No one should ever trust them again. No one should ever vote for them again. And if you care about Henry Nowak, if the case of Henry Nowak brought tears to your eyes, if it made you choke up, if it made you angry, the best way that you can action that anger in a meaningful sense is by a total and utter and complete rejection of Kemi Badenoch, Donna Jones, and every aspect of that rotten so-called Conservative Party.
Well said, Mark. Well said. Yeah, we could keep talking about this for hours, honestly, because there is just so much, and things keep unfolding. But for now, I think we'll leave it there. But yeah, Mark, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate this.
Well, thank you for having me on. And just one last call. Please follow me on Rumble. Please follow me on Telegram. And if you want all of the details on this case, I couldn't drop all the details because there's just too much. It's all sort of in my head. And it's hard sometimes to get it out when you've got so much to say. But if you want to read it all in an in-depth article, I've written 3 of those articles. They're on my Substack. They're free to read, but you can support me financially there if you wish, and that would be greatly appreciated. Yeah. Thank you for having me on again. It's been an amazing hour, and I really, really hope that people listen to this and understand the true gravity of the situation and the fact that the entire system is geared in this way. These outcomes that we keep seeing are not the result of a couple of woke judges or bad eggs in the police. These outcomes are due to systemic bias. Exactly. And that is what the system was designed to achieve.
Yeah, and actually, sorry, just to continue off that, more and more people are becoming aware of this. I am trying to set up my own community as well. I'm trying to funnel people to Patriotic Alternative because we do need to collectivize. We do actually need to start looking out for ourselves because, as Mark is rightfully saying, this is systemic. The system is geared against us. The quicker we can realize that, the quicker we can actually get things back to normal to a certain degree. You know, we have the greatest chance possible if we all act together, if we're all act as one. So yeah, please follow Mark on Substack. Please follow him on the Rumble. Follow me on Substack as well. And yes, as we go on, we'll figure things out together. Mark, thanks very much.
Thanks again, mate, and I hope we can do this more regularly.
Yeah, I think these are only going to become more common. So if you've made it this far, first of all, thanks very much. If you're watching on YouTube, please remember to comment, share, and subscribe. And if you're watching on Spotify, please be sure to give it a 5-star review. The full uncensored version of this episode can be found on Substack and Substack alone. Both YouTube and Spotify require censorship. However, Substack doesn't. With one YouTube already taken away, it's only a matter of time before it happens again. On top of that, with the Substack, we'll be doing live Q&As, talks with some of the biggest voices in this space, and a chance for you to ask the questions you want answering. Head over to Substack now for only £5 a month. I'll leave a link for this in the bio below. Cancel anytime. Thanks for watching this week's episode, and I hope to see you next time. All the best.